Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Real Life Process podcast. I'm excited that you're back with us again this week. And we come together here on the podcast to talk about all kinds of things related to our process and the components that we use. But we also dive in to other topics as well, anything around learning to live from our real self into our real life and doing our real work out in the world. And I'm excited today because I have a guest, but she's someone who's been on the podcast quite often, but not for a little while. So Erica Vinson, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here, Teresa.
I do believe that this is probably your first time doing it on video. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Normally, we used to always do the podcast just as an audio podcast, but now we do actually put the podcast out on our YouTube channel at the Real Life Process on YouTube. Just Google that and you'll find us there on YouTube as well. And we'd love for you to subscribe. Sometimes we, enjoy having some type of visual component, but it's great to have you on, whether audio or video. And I'm excited about the topic we're going to talk about again today.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. This is one of our core tools, whether we're working with clients or facilitators. And so we use it with kids and adults alike. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so the tool that we're referencing that we're going to dive into is actually one that I talk about in the book. We had our new book come out on November 1st. And so in one of the chapters of the book, I talk about some of the core tools that we have found helpful here at the process. And this really is part of what we call the real self piece. So some of that foundational work that people are doing in the discovering of who am I being in the world, many times it's helpful to bring along some tools, is what we call them, to do some of that self-discovery. And so in this particular chapter in the book, I talk about some of those tools. And these are not the end-all tools. These are just some that we found really helpful. So the tool of the Enneagram is one. That's a personality assessment tool that you and I both love to work with, and so do many of our facilitators. But this needs and values assessment just comes in a little bit differently. And before we started recording, I was starting to tell you the story of just because it's not a personality tool, I think it feels different because it's not putting you in a box. So many personality tools that everybody's using right now say, you're this type, or you're an S or a C, or you're a quick start on the Colby, or you're a whatever on whatever. And it kind of boxes you into something. But something that I find unique about this needs and values assessment is that it's unique to you. And so say more about that, Erica, like how you feel that this is different from some of the other tools that are out there right now.
Yes, I love because it is so foundational, I think, to how we're created. And so instead of just telling you, here's your strength, or as you said, here's a weakness that you have or an area of development, it really just goes down deep to this foundational level of what are the things that you need. And we believe God is the supplier of our needs. I know you're going to talk more about that, but really, what are the things that you need so that you can go out and live the life that you want to live? And so it doesn't matter whether we're sitting with clients that are kids or working with adults, it just really spans over all the age groups because it just goes down foundationally to how we're created.
Yeah, it is that uniqueness about us. So we have just, as we've used this tool now for a few years, and we have just really discovered that this is one of the tools that whether it's our clients or our facilitators really can resonate with. And I actually was just recording a podcast with my friend Mike Kim a few weeks ago. And one of the questions he asked me is, do you find that there's a similarity between like entrepreneurs? Do they all have certain needs or, certain values? And I was like, well, yes, maybe, but not really, because it's formed out of your own unique needs. And this assessment is just a way of helping you see, like, what are my top 5, 6, 7? Sometimes you'll have several that'll tie right there. But and it just gives you language to those needs. So when you think about that language that he gives you, what comes to mind for you, Erica, when you think about that?
Well, it just gives you a voice. And for me personally, I may have a need to communicate, and Teresa, you may have that same need, but because we're made differently and we're wired differently, my need for communication, when I get down to it, is to be heard.
Mhm.
And so yours may look differently when you define it. And I love that about the language piece that you talked about, because it really lights a client up when they're able to go, oh, that's what that means to me. And when I can communicate that to you, if communication is a need for me that's important, then you listen differently when you show up in relationship as you understand my needs.
So, playing off of that one, communicate will just give you an example as a listener. So, communicate would be the category of the need. But then under that, and is these four kind of choices that you could say to define it even further. So, you might have a need to communicate, which comes out as being heard. Another one might be you have a need to communicate, but you need to speak, or you need to share, or you have a need to inform. So when you talked about, you know, somebody might have it to be heard and another person might need to communicate because they actually want to inform others of something. Two totally different ways that that word communicate could come to life. And I think that's one of the things I love about diving a little deeper. So in the book, we actually have kind of a free version of this, and in this chapter, and it just gives the main categories, but it doesn't go into um, kind of the four other options of that word. But it's a great place to get you started. And many times I'll just have someone look at the sheet of this free needs and values assessment. We actually have that available as a download that you can get on our website. And it doesn't go into the categories, but it gives you somewhere to kick off and go, oh, these resonate with me. And I can find more about them. Give us a little more definition, Erica, for those that are listening, of this idea of needs, if you would, and how we define it here, because a lot of people will push back a little bit with us, right? And be like, well, I don't know if we should have needs. We've kind of been programmed in that that'd be like putting ourselves first, and we should always be about other people. So what's your thoughts on that when you think about needs?
Yeah, well, and some people have resistance because they hear the word need and they think it means needy. And so if I have needs, I am needy, and they don't want to associate with that. And really, we at the Real Life Process talk about needs as just basic things that we need, that are unique requirements to thrive in life and work. And so, when those things go unmet for us, and when they are not honored, or when they're just non-existent even, it really makes it difficult for us to show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's really is just about what basically do you is important to you uniquely to show up fully in the world.
And in the dictionary, and I talk about this in the book, the Webster's dictionary says, to live or succeed or be happy.
Mm,
Well, that's a pretty surfacey description of, like, oh, if I have a need and I need this to be happy. We believe it does go deeper than that. And it's not up to any one person to provide those needs for you.
mm,
So, I'm married and my husband Dale knows my needs, knows my exact needs, but he doesn't know those because I'm putting that on him to say, oh, I have a need for this. Recognition is one of them. And so it's not on him to recognize me all the time. It's actually on me
mm,
internally, as I live from this place of being, to look and see where I am being recognized and be grateful, whether it's in a spiritual practice or a daily gratitude practice or whatever, for places that I do feel recognized. Or on the opposite side, right, to notice where I'm not feeling that and why. What is shut down in me? What have I pushed aside? And I'm not taking in the recognition that I'm receiving. For somebody saying, hey, you did a great job with that, and I just dismiss it. So, how does that play out for you?
Yeah, even with the example of recognition, one of the things that came to mind as you were talking was just about celebration. And so, anytime when we set ourselves up to have our needs met by others, we will be disappointed just
Mhm.
because we're human. And so, even looking inward to say, how am I pausing to recognize? We use even a practice of review that's part of the real life process. And so, as part of that practice of review, every Friday, I take time to celebrate. Like, what have I really done well this week? And what can I celebrate? Sometimes I share that. Sometimes it's just something I do written on my own. But I have an ownership too to value that need and know, yes, that God is going to supply and He's going to be there as well. But I have to be present to my needs as well.
Yeah, it's so important. So, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this today is that we are excited about some things that we're putting out. So, we knew as we launched the book, and we've been in book launch mode now for about a month. We're wrapping it up kind of here at the 1st of December. But as the book came out, there would be other things that we wanted to add on and that we wanted to make available for you as the reader, for you as the clients that we work with, and to our facilitators who are out there taking this content into the world. And one of those things is a full needs and values assessment. So our facilitators have had access to that. And if you worked with one of them, you could do the full assessment. But we now have it available on our website, and we're super excited about that. And we'll talk a bit more about values here in just a minute, but we're really excited to have this full needs and values assessment available to you. Some of you have even already reached out and said, okay, you talk about it in the book, but where is it? And we're like, oh yeah, it's coming. So we apologize if you've been listening and you're like, where is it at? But if you go to the reallifeprocess.com, and remember we spell real life with one L, so the reallifeprocess.com, and you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a place where you can click on the link, and it will take you to a place to purchase the full assessment. So we wanted to make just the beginning assessment absolutely free as a resource that we give out for free. And in the book, you can begin the journey and start to ask yourself some questions. But we're now bringing out the full assessment. And the reason I wanted to have Erica on the podcast is because she actually will be the one that would be reviewing those assessments with you. So live and in person, this is the person that you would talk to after you had taken the assessment. We have a great value on this process, and she can walk you through and just kind of begin to discover, okay, I've taken the assessment. It's just a PDF. I don't know, what would you say it takes? 20 minutes, less than 30 minutes to take the full assessment. And once you have kind of your answers gathered together, you, as a part of the purchase of that package, can schedule a call with Erica, and she will actually walk you through some discovery around your results. When you do that with someone, Erica, when we do that with clients that we work with, what do you feel like is some of the things that, are going to be takeaways that someone might have from doing this full assessment?
Well, it's been incredibly valuable for me personally, but I would say in working with clients too, just being able to name not only that broader category of the need, but also then the more exact need. And then the work that we do in coaching is to bring it down to a granular level to say, what does that actually look like when you're living it out? And so that's part of the process. What does that feel like? What are you doing when that need is really being met? What does that look like? And then how are you acting? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Those types of things, because we work so much with the three centers of intelligence. And so then it makes it very easy for a client to go, oh, once I've named it, I can actually see when it shows up, in my real life. and they can name it, and they also can name when it's not met. I've
Right.
actually was working with one of our facilitators just last week on a coaching call, and she had just had a challenging interaction. She'd had some time with her teenage children, and then she just walked into a coaching experience, and she said, I just didn't recognize, like, I was out of sorts with my client. And so the question I asked her, I said, look at your top 5 needs. What was met? And almost immediately, as she looked at that, she just paused and she said, none of them.
Mhm.
And so just the freedom to say, I have a need for peace, I have a need for order or clarity, and all of these things, down the list, none of them were met. So when I stepped into my client experience, I wasn't fully present as a coach. And I need to give myself some margin to pay attention to that before I walk into my workspace and
Mhm.
really show up fully. So that's just a real life example.
It is, and that's the whole purpose of these types of assessments is not just to put them on the shelf. Our friend Kent Julian, we often quote him as saying, it's not just shelf help. So anytime you do these types of things, and we talk about them in the book as kind of what we call pre-work, like before you really dive into the components, maybe you'll want to take an Enneagram, maybe you'll want to pull out a strengths assessment or a spiritual gifts assessment or take the needs and values. But these are only as valuable. So if you purchase a full assessment, make sure you do the call with
Yeah.
Erica to talk about it and work through just even one example of where that shows up in your real life. And I've shared this story before. I have to share it again as we move into even, let's talk about values for a little bit, Erica.
Mhm.
And I always call my husband out on this one. And because values are another part of this assessment. So needs are one part. And then we also look at what are your top 5 values. Now, these are not the end all value words, right? These are just 15 different categories. But then again, it goes into the unique individual value. And so this is how it plays out in real life on the McCloy farm. Many of you know, live on a farm here in Southern Illinois. My husband, we call him Farmer Dale. He's been a farmer forever, his entire life. And we were doing this assessment together a few years ago. And one of his values, top 5, is winning. Now, my husband is now 64 years old and at the time was probably 61, something like that. And and his exact need is compete, or its exact value, excuse me. So in the winning category is um the word to take, like I'm gonna take it from you. That feels like winning. To compete, to engage, or victory. I need victory. And Dale shared with me his exact word would be to compete. Well, when he was younger, he rode enduro dirt bikes, he played fast pitch softball. Um, he did things that were very athletic and competitive. And, I said, so at 61 years old, how are you still living out that value? Because this is a value that's important to him. So where can that show up? And he said, it's having better crops, better farm crops than the guy next to me. So within this very quiet man who you would never know that, but internally, he is saying, I'm still competing. I'm competing with my neighbor right next to me, and not in a spiteful way, but I'm competing to see like how many bushels per acre. That's what farmers talk about. Um, but that's the everyday real life stories that we say, how's this still play out for you? Because if Dale dismisses that he values winning, that's like taking a part of himself and saying, this doesn't matter. Like I've lost this part of me. So tell us a little bit more about values, Erica. How do we see that? How do we lean into that? If people were to take this assessment, what are values for us?
Yeah. Well, through the real life lens, values really just show, they represent for us and show how we express ourselves in the world. And so you hear us talk even at the real life process about being and doing. And so needs is really the being part. How are we created? How are we made? And then our values are the doing part. What does it
Mhm.
look like when we show up in the world. And so it really is unique to how it matters for us. So I love that real life example every time I hear you talk about it for Dale, because he's so present to what he values as a farmer in his livelihood.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm picking on my husband today, but I think they're good real life examples because another one of his values, no, actually, that's one of his needs. So I sometimes confuse the two. So I won't tell that story because it is to be cherished. That's one of his needs. And that was such an aha moment for me to think, my husband has a need to be cherished. It sounds like a squishy, lovey word, but yet I did want to, as his wife, say, so how do I support that need? Because that is loving to say, I know my spouse's needs or I know my children's needs, and they're unique. And so, as someone who loves them dearly, I want to know that information and I want to be able to show up for them in that way. Again, I'm not responsible for that or even their acceptance of it. But that just shows you the value of the language of these words. And I love what you said, Eric, about this is how we do it in the doing. So values are things like beauty and catalyst and discovery and feelings and leadership. And then they all have their exact need categories. So again, in the book, you can, look at these things and you can do your top needs and values, but we really encourage you to jump on the website, scroll down, um, do a little deeper work, do a little deeper. What would be my exact needs and values? And then what would I discover in conversation? So when you think about the values part of a conversation with a client on a call like this, what are you looking for? What are you looking to discover with that person?
Well, really, in what you say that matters to you, is it showing up in what you do? And so, one of the things that we do through the process too is identify those areas of focus, those big rock areas and things that matter to you. And I'll tell a story on myself. I was sitting with you and one of our other team members on a retreat, and we were going through our values. And I have a value for discovery and learning and teaching. And so, a couple of things that are very professionally work related. And I was listing off my areas of focus and they were all personal. And I loved what you said to me. And you said, "Where's your work?" And I said, "Well, of course, work is a part of that. But when we don't name that and actually give it language as an area of focus, I was actually disconnected from that value of discovery and learning. Not that I can't do that in personal spaces with adventure and hobbies and other things that I enjoy, but it was so helpful for me to see this is something that's very important. It shows up in at least two of your core values. So then it needs to be tied directly to areas of focus that matter to you, that then link to the projects and the action that you're taking every
Yeah.
90 days.
I remember that moment and just what an aha that was for you to go. And because you're also a thinker. So for those of you that are listening are really head types and in your head and you're thinking many times, and this is not all the time because we're all uniquely and wonderfully made, but many times a head person can be very much in their head and in the discovery and in the depth of something. And they can't get started to go do something. So when you're looking at the big rocks in your life, we call them areas of focus, your family, your extended family, your spiritual life, your health. You had all those things like, oh, I've got it all together. And then I'm like, wait a second. You have work that you do. You have a professional life that you do out in the world. And you had completely forgotten to give that a category. And it was just so interesting. And then I've worked with clients on the other end of things who are so work driven that when we talk about their real life mission statement, when we talk about their areas of focus, they almost can't connect the being side of self. So in this beginning discovery of our real self, it's both and. It's not just our work and it's not just our being or, how we're living out other parts of our lives that are not around the work that we're doing. It's a both and. And I think the needs and values It's why we start with them. It's why it's on what we call your real life view document, where you collect and capture all the things about yourself in one space and in one part of that. And I talk about how to do that in the book. But it's part of that. It's why we start with it, because it becomes the foundational piece that starts to give you language about who you are. And if you value that, like you said, where is it showing up? Where's it playing out, even in your calendar? If you say you value being a catalyst, where did I spend any time this week in that space and living that out? Or, if you value winning, where does that play out? And we can go for a while as human beings. I don't know what your opinion on this would be. I think we can go for a while without that need being met or that value being lived out. But after a while, Dallas Willard says, come away with me for a while or you'll fall apart after a while. That's not a direct quote, by the way. He says it much better than that. But that's what starts to happen. And you wonder what happened. And, it usually is tied back to some of these core foundational discoveries that, as a believer, I believe you and God have that work to do together.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Teresa. And I would venture to say people could live maybe a long time without sometimes those things being, whether it's undernourished or dismissed, however you want to name it. And the moment that they kind of bring it to the surface and allow that part of them to come back into congruency and remember really in the way they're made, it's really a unique privilege to sit on the other side of that conversation and just watch that moment for them. Sometimes it's just in a deep breath. Sometimes it's in tears. Sometimes, it's a sigh of relief.
Or it's an aha. It's like their eyes are just wide open and they're just like, oh my gosh, I forgot. And I would say too, this isn't a once and done. It's constantly coming back to and remembering, as you said, that's a word that we love, remembering over and over again. Like, I need to remember again. And, that's why when I kind of created this process that we talk about in the book, it's not a once and done, here you go, you're going to live your best life. It's a work. And it's a coming back around every 90 days or so. It's coming back around, getting up on the balcony as often as possible around your life and out of the everyday, hair on fire stuff, and remembering that you have needs, that you have values. So we value this work. We value this assessment. It's a huge part. In fact, it's one of the assessments that our certified facilitators talk about the most, that they love being able to do and being able to offer as they're certified. So it's some of our unique property that we have here at the process that our facilitators get to use. But we're now ready to put it out in the world to you all, to be able to purchase and take the full assessment and have Erica walk you through that. And, we're just super excited to check this box here before the end of 2022. It might be something in the month of December as you're kind of, just spending some time stepping back that you want to lean into. And so again, just go to the website, thereallifeprocess.com, scroll down just about a half a page. It's right there in the middle of our homepage. You can click on that button and take the assessment. It won't take you long. And then there's a link to schedule on Erica's calendar to get a time with her to walk through your results. So Erica, thank you so much for diving back in today. It's been great to have you back on the podcast, and hopefully in 2023, we'll be doing it more often. You've been quite a regular, so it's been great to have you back.
Oh, it's been so good to be here. And we just love this tool. So I'm excited for the expanded platform, for it to be out in the world a little bit wider.
Yes, it will be fun. So, this is something too, as I talk about at the end of every podcast, this kind of work is where you can create some moments and just say, wow, that was an aha for me. We believe that every day has an extraordinary moment. You're just looking for them. You're just looking for where they're at. And even doing something like this can be a moment where you say and have the opportunity to sit with, wow, I had forgotten that that was a part of my story. So we just encourage you to dive in. We'll be here to support you in whatever you discover about yourself. And yeah, just have a great week, everyone. And we'll see you next week here on the Real Life Process podcast.